Welcome to Up Your Nerd Cred. Did you used to know everything that was happening in the Marvel and DC universes? Did finding out that some superheroes are from Marvel and some are from DC blow your mind? Has keeping track of everything that's happening there and then realizing that we're talking about the comics universe, not the cinematic ones, and all these different universes with their different multiversal crises, it's all gotten a little bit out of hand. Well, don't worry. Up Your Nerd Cred is here to talk about the gods cosplaying as men, the men cosplaying as gods, and how much the cinematic universes are leaving out. And at the end of each episode, you'll hopefully know a little more than you did and can up your nerd cred. I'm your casual nerd host, Kira. I used to be with it, and then it changed, and it'll happen to you. All right, Abe Simpson quotes aside, I'm here to ask the questions about what it is the casual nerd might have missed. I won't embarrass myself at a trivia night, but my co-host is the reason why we're winning.
And I'm A.M. Diaz, your gay comic geek. My truest love is graphic novels. I've been obsessed with all things pop culture and comic books and superheroes that I have made it my entire identity. I haven't missed a single opening night of the MCU ever, and my artistry has gone from the page to cosplay. I attend the cons, premieres, I've met with voice actors, all while wearing just so much blue makeup.
Yeah, so what this means is that he ain't new to it, he's true to it. Anyway, he is also our resident expert nerd, so I'll be asking him all kinds of burning questions each week, and we'll go from there. So I think the first thing that we need to talk about, though, is what are we nerding out about this week? Now, remember, listeners, you can nerd out about all kinds of things. It does not have to be heroes and villains, okay? Your favorite TV show has layers. Sun Royal was hooking up with someone in the 1800s. And also, Book Talk always has something weird happening. So, AM, what are you nerding out about this week?
Oh, just so much stuff. Latest Superman information that's been coming out. New trailers have been dropping, so been really excited about seeing that. I know that the DCEU films have their supporters and detractors. I'm leaning more towards a detractor, so I'm honestly really excited about the new James Gunn movie. Just something that feels a bit more in line with our Man of Steel.
I'm mostly excited to see Crypto, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Well, that's a big teller point for me, too. Yeah, and I know I've already just started us on controversy by daring to talk about the old films. But I'm just excited about the new film. It looks fun, and with everything going on, I need some nice, escapism.
The Snyder Cut was all fine, well, and good, but that was 4 hours of things being very, very sad and depressing. And there's that whole Ezra Miller thing that we don't really want to get into anymore.
Yeah, let's not. Ezra Miller is no longer relevant. We'll just leave that elsewhere.
That's right. The Flash absolutely did not happen as a movie.
Except for Michael Keaton. He was awesome.
Michael Keaton also likes to hop around DC and Marvel these days anyway. So, and I guess Sony. So, he's all we need is for him to be in a Dark Horse Comics or Vertigo or something. So when do you know when it comes out? It's coming out soon. In the next.
Yeah, I believe it's coming out this summer.
Excellent. I'm really excited for this. Also, Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. I think that she's going to be really good.
Oh yeah, I'm excited about her. I love Amy Adams as an actress, but I felt like they played her too soft in the DCEU films.
Okay.
And I love the way that our new Lois is just so in your face. She gets underneath Superman's skin of all people, and that's what we need. We need a Lois who is basically Margot Kidder reincarnated, going after the story, and she does not care whose tubes she has to step on to get it.
So Margot Kidder, are we talking animated series Lois? Because that lady,
Well, animated series was very based on a lot of the previous Lois Lanes as well, so.
I mean, then there's like Terry Hatcher.
Mm-hmm.
She did actually she did do a really solid Lois Lane. It's a shame that like whoever that Superman was completely dropped off the face of the planet. I have
Oh
no idea
yeah.
who that man
What
is.
what happened to him? I don't know. I don't know.
Something anyway. So completely separate from what you were nerding out about, Wheel of Time is getting canceled. They just like they got through 3 seasons of it and they're like, all right, that's enough.
I mean, that's gotta be disappointing for the fans. I unfortunately never read the books and I never saw the show, so. But as a fellow nerd,
You're not helping.
I commiserate with everyone about that.
For what it's worth, the reason that I got into it in the first place was because husband guy read all of the books, and so when Wheel of Time first came out, he's just like, "Oh, we got to go watch this." And so I made a whole point of like, I'm not going to read the books. I'm just going to see this completely as a show, like as it is, and see what happens. And I need you to know the number of rants that man went on after like every episode when he's just like, no, they did it this way in the book and they did it this way in the book and it was this way, this way. There were a lot of changes that they made. And then like the writer's strike made stuff weird. And I mean,
Yeah, no,
I don't know.
that tends to happen with adaptation, and you gotta go into every single adaptation with the mindset shit will change.
Yeah.
Because no matter how much you want to be as accurate as comics were, and I will agree, or books or whatever, it often is better in the original format. It's hard to maintain that when you're doing a TV show or a movie.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you really only have like, you know, 5, 10 episodes these days to like put anything together. Like we used to be a society. We used to have 20, 22 episode seasons. But yeah, no. So Wheel of Time has gone out. So now I pretty much have a lot of stuff on Dropout to look forward to. So, actually and Smarty Pants and stuff like that. So that's I guess I'll have that to look forward to.
Yep.
All right. So we're going to take a quick break though at that, and we are going to come back and I am going to ask our nerd expert all kinds of important questions. Come back soon. Welcome back. Okay, so the question burning me up this week is how many Robins are there? Okay, so realistically speaking, what is going on with the aggressive number of Robins? Like, it used to just be like the Boy Wonder, but there's a whole other list of people that I have. And hang on, I'm going to list all the official Robins that I have seen. And as an aside, listeners, when we first introduce a character, I'm going to note their code name, their government name, their creators, and their first appearance. So, for example, Batman, his government name is Bruce Wayne. He was created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane and was first introduced in Detective Comics number 27 in March 1939. So, our first Robin is Nightwing, aka Richard John Grayson. He was created by Bill Finger, Bob Kane, and Jerry Robinson. First came out in Detective Comics 1938. That's our standard Robin, right? That's the guy that everybody knows as Robin.
Yep, the base Robin, and also the iconic beginning of the sidekick craze of the 1940s up until like the 1980s.
Wait, so how is the sidekick craze went away in the 80s? But there are so many other Robins that came after that, though.
Yes, but the thing was, Dick Grayson's introduction was essentially what started other heroes getting sidekicks. So
Oh.
after the introduction of Dick Grayson, we suddenly got characters like Roy Harper Speedy for Green Arrow, Donna Troy for Wonder Girl. Her thing is a whole mess, an entire episode on its own. Garth as Aquaman's sidekick, Kid Flash, Bucky Barnes, all these other characters who started getting more and more attention as sidekicks. Dick Grayson was the one who started it all. As time passed, people started realizing, hey, maybe having kids running around with the superheroes kind of sus. So heroes started working a lot more
Yeah.
independently from sidekicks, and sidekicks either were pushed off to their own teams or just kind of faded off into obscurity. Dick Grayson and the Robins are the only ones that kept going.
That makes sense. Because I have so Robin, the Red Hood version, aka Jason Todd, who was created by Jerry Conway and Don Newton, came out in Batman 357 in March '83, and then Red Robin was Tim Drake, and I'm sorry,
Best Robin.
so Timothy Jackson Drake, his full name. He was created by Marv Wolfman and Pat Broderick, and he came out in Batman number 436 in August 1989. So yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense because, well, wait, because Damian Wayne came out in 1987 too, though, right? Hang on, let me double check. Yeah, Damian Wayne, whose legal name is Damian Wayne, who was created by Mike W. Barr and Jerry Bingham, came out in Batman: Son of the Demon in 1987. Yeah, so there's a lot of Robins that are like popping out in the 80s. I thought you said they were all going away.
Well, that was the thing. I didn't say the Robins went away in the 80s. I said other sidekicks went away in the 80s. The Robins kept coming back because that was just too iconic to lose. Batman and Robin were a package deal. But even then, they were still pushing Batman to be a solo individual character, especially in the 80s. So Dick Grayson got pushed off to the Teen Titans and was living his best life as becoming Nightwing and growing into his own hero. And then Jason was introduced because they still felt like they needed a Robin, but they needed a younger one. Because Dick was like 19, 20 years old at this point. He was no longer the boy wonder.
That's fair.
Because sidekicks are generally allowed to grow up. The adult heroes, unfortunately, hit 30, and they are not allowed to go beyond that point.
So Nightwing has grown up, and now we have Jason Todd, who's out here living his most Robin-y life. How's Jason Todd's tenure as Robin go?
Oh, it was chaos. Absolute chaos. So when he was introduced, Jason Todd was essentially Dick Grayson light. Literally everything about him was Dick Grayson. His family was circus performers. They were killed by the mob. He was adopted by Bruce Wayne. You know, put on the Robin sidekick. I was very happy to be there. He was so energetic and just so, excited to be Robin.
Right.
But the thing was, people were just kind of like, well, it's just another version of Dick Grayson. There wasn't anything really distinctive about him as a character.
I mean, so rather than fade him out, what did they do?
Well, Crisis on Infinite Earth happened. So that was the big company-wide crossover shakeup event where during the 1930s up until the 1980s, they basically made it to where every story was canon. It just took place on a different Earth. So you had the Golden Age heroes where you had Jay Garrick as the Flash, Alan Scott as the Green Lantern, and then you had the modern day heroes, which was Barry Allen as the Flash and Hal Jordan as the Green Lantern, and you had versions of Batman and Superman. So a Batman and Superman who fought during World War II, but then you had more modern versions who clearly couldn't have fought during that war because they were still in their 30s.
Right.
So the crisis happened, and that caused all the universes and all the stories to be haphazardly condensed into a single universe. That allowed them to start retelling stories and doing new versions of characters. So Wonder Woman, for example, was reintroduced as, instead of being a World War II soldier fighter, she is now just coming into Earth for the first time, or coming to man's world for the first time in the 1980s.
Just for funsies?
Well, they wanted to make it more easier for readers to follow because there's so many versions of the character. Readers were having problems keeping up. So they just wanted to kind of start things over again. And they also used this opportunity to reinvent some characters. Jason Todd was one of those characters, so they wanted to make him a bit more distinctive. So instead of being this happy-go-lucky circus boy whose parents were killed during the circus by the mob, he was instead a street kid living in Crime Alley whose father was a goon for Two-Face, and his, we'll say stepmother technically, was a drug addict. And she died.
We don't actually know where mom is, or?
Well, that kind of leads into how his story progressed.
Okay.
So with Jason, it was weird because of the fact that the crisis had happened while stories were still being told. Some writers were still writing Jason as he was before, where he was like very energetic and happy and optimistic. But then other stories written by writers who frankly did not like the idea of a Robin existing at all started writing him as more of a I'm not gonna say jerk, but he was a lot more angry and aggressive.
Okay.
And
So,
like there's one storyline where he may or may not have killed a man, but we're not sure about it.
pretty sure that there's like a whole no killing, like, we can maim you, we can give you very severe hospital bills that I assume that Bruce takes care of later, but people aren't supposed to die.
And that's how Batman felt too. So the fact that Batman himself wasn't sure whether or not Jason had essentially this drug dealer had been targeting a woman, and Jason got so furious about this that he went to confront the guy after the girl unfortunately committed suicide for fear of the drug dealer coming after her. And the thing was, this drug dealer was also the son of a diplomat, so the law couldn't touch him.
Of course
And
not.
Jason went to confront him, and then when Batman showed up, he saw the diplomat's son falling off of a fire escape, and he
Oh,
asked Jason, "Did he jump or was he pushed?" And Jason didn't quite answer in a convincing way. If I remember correctly, he just said he must have slipped. I must have scared him. And this, yeah,
drug
this,
dealers with immunity aren't really known for being like scared. Like, okay, all right, he was
especially of a
startled.
boy in a brightly colored costume.
What? You mean bright red does not strike fear into the hearts of
I mean, it can, but we'll get to that Robin later.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, so that kind of led to Batman questioning whether or not Jason even should be Robin.
not if you're killing people. There are rules.
Exactly. And that led to Batman benching him. But at the same time that he did this, Jason found out that the woman he thought his mother was not his mother.
So, okay. This kid's going through it. All right. So,
They gave Jason some drama.
so what? They're
And
just like, nah, man, you were too happy like 5 minutes ago. We're going
yeah,
to make sure that everything in your life falls apart horribly.
yeah. God, I love how long we're going into the Jason Todd story just because of how juicy it is. Dick Grayson had
Well,
such an easier story.
I mean, yeah, okay, he was a circus kid and then he was like adopted by Bruce Wayne, and it's already a whole bunch of weird stuff, and like there's plenty of episodes or issues where there was people who were concerned about it being a little bit too gay because of him and his ward just like hanging out all the time, but
Never mind the fact that his
yeah.
ward was a literal child.
Oh my, they were more mad about the prospect of it being gay than they were about it being a child.
Yeah. Priorities of the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s. But, anyways, Jason went looking for his mom.
Hmm.
Turns out that his mom was working with the Joker of all people. And the
That's
Joker
a
then
moment.
Yeah, and Jason, instead of waiting for Batman, went in it alone, proceeded to get beaten with a crowbar and then blown up by the Joker, along with his mother, who had sold him out to the Joker. And all this happened because the fans were given an option of whether or not Jason could live or die. They could
It
call
didn't
one eight
have to
hundred
be this
number.
way.
Yeah. They had 1-800 number that would allow him to live and another one that would have him die. And the vast majority of people voted for death. And Jason go boom.
Brr, brr, brr,
Yeah,
brr, brr, brr. Did he ever come back?
he did indeed. He was for the longest time considered one of those characters that you couldn't touch. He was supposed to remain dead. But then Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb did the Batman Hush storyline, where a villain is targeting Batman and Bruce Wayne at the same time. He knows who they are, and he is getting all of Batman's villains involved. And during the almost climax of the story,
Hmm.
Batman is confronted with who he thinks is the villain, and the man unbandages himself, and who is it but Jason Todd?
All right. I didn't know that we were just like surviving explosions all willy-nilly, but sure. Okay.
That's the thing. As the story progressed, we find out that no, that wasn't Jason Todd. That was Clayface posing as Jason.
Okay.
But then we find out it was Jason Todd because during the big company-wide event, Crisis on Infinite Earths, we find out that Jason Todd is, or not Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis. Sorry, my mistake. During Infinite
These multiversal
Crisis,
crises are getting out of hand.
oh, you have no idea. We're only at like two of them. There are dozens. They were doing them like every other year.
Oh my
But
God. Okay.
turns out that Jason Todd was alive. He had died, however. But thanks to the reality punching shenanigans of a alternate universe Superboy, he broke reality and resurrected Jason. And then Jason was fully resurrected thanks to a Lazarus pit.
Oh, okay. So we're just getting. I hadn't even brought up Ra's al Ghul yet. I hadn't even
Oh
brought
no,
him
but
up yet.
let's not even go into there because that's an entire episode on its own.
That's true. Okay,
Yeah.
so Jason Todd, he comes back, and so he becomes like Red Hood and everything. What does that mean?
Eggs.
Like, how does this?
So with Jason, after he came back from the dead, he was pissed because Batman had let the Joker live. He would have thought that if he had died at the Joker's hand, the Batman would go after the Joker and finally take him out. When he'd found out the Joker was still alive, Jason decided to do an FU to both Batman and the Joker by taking on the Joker's original moniker of the Red Hood. And he
Okay,
went
because I
on,
definitely, yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense.
and he went on a murder spree, killing crime lords and criminals, and just being like the absolute most violent serial killer in Gotham. But eventually he got softer, and now he's like, the rough and tumble bad boy of the family.
Okay, what
Yeah.
about
So
Tim Drake? Is he okay?
depends on which era you talk about.
Oh my God. Okay, so tell me about Tim. Tell me about Mr. Tim Jackson Drake.
So Timothy Jackson Drake is my absolute favorite Robin of all time and my favorite character of all time. He is the one who
Oh,
got me into comics.
really? I never
Yeah.
would have guessed.
Yeah, no, I don't know how you would never have guessed. No, no,
This
no
is
idea, no idea. Deep mystery.
it. Listeners, there is a very real reason why our first episode is about Robins, and it is because this man has made Robin so much his personality that that's what is stored as in my phone. I am not Batman, but this man is Robin. Anyway, please continue.
So Tim Drake was created as largely a way to bring in Robin because they felt like Batman on his own was, they told a lot of stories of him solo, but having a Robin kind of like evens him out, makes him less of a Punisher type character, more, you know, dynamic.
He's Doctor
And
Who without a companion.
essentially,
Mm,
and the thing was, they were kind of wanting to do something better than what they did with Jason, because Jason was literally just initially created to be a replacement for Dick Grayson.
okay.
So they decided to make a Robin who was tied into the mythology from the start. So Tim was the son of a pair of business owners and archaeologists, Jack and Janet Drake. And when Tim was about 2 or 3 years old, they took him to his very first circus, Haley's Circus, the same circus where Dick Grayson and his family performed, and they arrived on the same night where the Great Flying Graysons had their last performance together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tim was met Dick Grayson and his family when they were on the way to the tent, and his parents asked if he could get a photo with them because Tim was kind of scared of the circus. And Tim unfortunately had this small issue of he didn't have bad parents, but they were kind of neglectful. They were always so busy with their jobs, they didn't really give him the attention he really needed as a kid.
Which is how you end up
And
as a Robin. Yes.
essentially. And so when the fact that Dick Grayson gave him this special attention, even promised to do his performance for Tim specifically, Tim fixated on Dick Grayson as a result. He became very attached to him, which also leads into some questions about his future romantic interests.
Um, Yes, most people don't just get completely smitten and just like unable to function whenever they meet some big, tough, manly man, unless he happens to be wearing a skin tight uniform or something. Anyway, that's
I
not the
mean,
point.
to
What do
be
you?
to be fair, Dick was only 10 at the or 8 or 10 at the time.
Oh, never mind. I'm sorry. I thought that there was a different age. There was an age differential. Whoop, nope.
No,
Reel
Dick's
that
parents were
back.
still alive at this point. So Dick Grayson was, depending on who's telling the story, 8 to 10 years old.
Oh, okay, great. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
He like I like being cool. I want to be cool like the big kids. That's what we're going
Yeah,
with. You're
but
being
I
cool like the big kids.
well, I always think of this as like Tim's first boy crush, but he just doesn't realize what it is at the time. Because you
That's
know how
fair.
kids are. They crush on somebody but don't quite realize what the crush is. They just
Yeah, and
really
then
like
they're
this
like,
person.
yeah, I like you so much, and I'm gonna pull your hair. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I was thinking more just like wanting to hang out with them all the time. But anyways, uh, Tim and his family went to the circus. They met the Graysons. The adult Graysons, John and Mary, were unfortunately killed by gangsters. And Tim, aside from being just like a really precocious kid, he was also highly intelligent. Like, even at a
Well,
young age, he was smarter than most children at that age. And so he remembered every detail of that night for years, including the fact that that Dick Grayson did a trick that only 3 people in the world could perform, and 2 of them were grown adults.
okay, so just like casual eidetic memory. Cool, cool.
Yep. And when Tim was about 9 years old, he saw some footage on the news of Batman and Robin fighting the Penguin, during which he saw Robin perform the same trick that only 3 people in the world were capable of.
And 2 of them were dead.
No, they were alive. Well,
Well,
maybe.
wait. Did he become a Robin before or after his parents died?
Oh no, who?
Were Dick
Dick?
Grayson's parents letting him run around with this
No,
with
no,
this
no.
girl
Dick,
behind the
pa-
head?
Dick,
Okay.
Dick's parents were dead, but I never said that his parents were the ones who could do the trick.
Uh,
There were other characters, so I think one of them was Dead Man.
oh. Oh, okay. All right.
So
Okay. No, I
yeah,
guess when you said 2 grown adults, I thought you were talking about his parents. That's fair.
yeah. They never said who the 2 people were specifically, but it was implied that Dead Man was one of them.
Okay.
But Tim realized immediately by that trick that only Dick Grayson could be Robin, and then he
Right.
put 2 and 2 together that Dick Grayson was adopted by Bruce Wayne, ergo Bruce Wayne is Batman. He figured this out at 9 years old, while the United States government could not figure it out for like 10, 20 years. Say what that will about the government.
I mean, there's an old joke that we've heard of if the opposite of pro is con, what is the opposite of progress? Congress.
uh,
That's a terrible joke. So, okay, like Tim is sitting here trying to like live his best life, having figured out that Batman and Bruce Wayne are the same person at the age of 9 years old, which very impressive for this kid. But like,
yeah. And so he, just was a fanboy of them. He watched their careers and he watched Dick grow up to be Nightwing and leave. And then he saw that Bruce Wayne had adopted a new orphan, Jason Todd. At which point, Jason Todd soon passed away.
yeah,
And Robin stopped appearing with Batman. And Tim started to see that Batman was becoming, for lack of a better word, unhinged, more violent, more aggressive, appearing to be injured more often than not because he was not protecting himself. And Tim decided that he figured out Batman needs a Robin to keep him sane.
oh,
So,
a wealthy
in
vigilante must be in want of a Robin.
more the borderline dangerous vigilante who has the ability to kill a lot of people is getting closer to crossing that line.
Oh yeah, no, that's fair. I guess that's how we ended up with like Batfleck with the guns and such, because no Robin. All right, so Tim is sitting there like stalking to make sure that he knows like when there is an opening, and like he keeps being ready for this opening since he was
Well, that's
like a
the thing.
small child.
No, that's the thing. He never even considered being Robin. In fact, he just thought he just really cared about these people, even though he barely knew any of them. And he ended up well, stalking. I mean, Tim is a bit of a stalker. He's a fanboy in the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to Dick Grayson at the Titans and was trying to convince Dick to take on the Robin identity again, to go back to being Robin to help Batman. But Dick's like,
Uh,
no, I'm an adult.
I'm
I've got
grown.
my own life.
I am
I
not
am
wearing
not
them little tights anymore.
exactly. I am not wearing the booty shorts and the pixie boots. I am 20 something years old now. But
Then again, I have seen some men who have worn the original Boy Wonder outfit. Anyway, that's not the point.
mm,
I respect that. So Tim is just like, well, you're not going to do it, then
somebody has
I'll
to.
do
And
it
so
myself.
he threw on the costume to help them against Two-Face. Batman and Nightwing were captured or almost killed, and Tim showed up and eventually convinced Batman to take him on as Robin. Again, Tim had not intended for this to happen, but he realized when he was helping them, Batman needed a Robin, and he was right there. But keep in mind, Tim was still with parents. He was not like an orphaned kid. His mom and dad were at the time still alive when he met Batman and Robin, or Batman and Nightwing.
Okay, so yeah, wait, the way that you say that makes it sound like his parents are no longer with us.
Unfortunately, no. Shortly before Tim was officially made Robin, because Batman had a long period where Tim had to train. He was not going to put another untrained child in the field.
Reasonable.
Uh, so he had a period where Tim was living with Bruce Wayne because his parents were traveling. Because again, they were archaeologists and business people, so they had foreign businesses they had to deal with and archaeology digs and all this.
Oh,
And
sure.
they ended up getting captured by a uh, Caribbean crime lord known as the Bia Man.
The what
I
man?
believe that's the Obia Man. I believe that was his name.
Okay.
And during that time, Tim's mother was poisoned and killed, and Tim's father was poisoned but left completely handicapped from like initially the neck down,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was like in this coma for a while. Then he couldn't like barely move any parts of his body, but eventually Jack started to do physical therapy, improved, was able to start walking again, and regained his life. But during all this time, Tim was living a double life as Robin. So he was trying to
Right.
hide his identity from his father and also his new stepmother, who his father had remarried during that time. His stepmother was actually his physical therapist. So very soap opera-y.
Okay, you know what? Florence Nightingale effect. It impacts all kinds of people. Okay,
Yeah.
so he's got a stepmom, he's got a dad, and he's
And
got a double life.
yeah, and he's more or less able to hold it all together. That is until Crisis on Infinite, or not Crisis. I always want to say Crisis on. There's so many crises. Identity Crisis.
Okay, this is the third crisis now that you have mentioned. I want to make sure that we're on the same page,
Oh yeah, and
right?
there's more. There's just ever so many more.
Just checking. Okay, cool.
And with Identity Crisis, this was more less a big company-wide cosmic event and more a personal story where essentially the loved ones of superheroes were being targeted by an unknown villain.
Okay.
And the villain of the story had hired a Flash villain, Captain Boomerang, to kill Jack Drake. Jack, meanwhile, was sent a gun in the mail and told to defend himself.
All
Jack proceeds to call Tim to let him know what's happening, and Tim unfortunately has to listen on the phone as Boomerang and Jack kill themselves. Boomerang throws a boomerang into Jack's chest, and Jack unloads a clip inside of Boomerang. So Tim
That
comes
is
home to find his father brutally murdered.
that is trauma moment.
Yep. And it doesn't stop there, because a few months after that, Tim's best friend and somebody who Tim has quite possibly the deepest emotional connection with, Superboy,
Mhm.
was killed during the next Crisis event, Infinite Crisis.
Okay.
Then his girlfriend was also killed shortly before his father's death during the Gotham gang wars. So Stephanie Brown was murdered by the Black Mask. We'll get to
Wait,
Stephanie soon.
Okay, I was gonna say like Stephanie Brown is also on my Robin list.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about her soon.
Okay.
And then soon after, his other friend, Bart Allen, Kid Flash slash Impulse, died fighting the Flash Rogues. And Tim was going through it, especially when then finally the nail in the coffin, Bruce Wayne died.
Jason Todd was just too happy, and they decided that every other Robin had to suffer forever.
Yep.
Okay, so everybody's dead.
Yeah.
Um,
And Tim this time can't let it go. Because
right.
Tim had some issues going on. Like when Superboy died, he tried to reclone him over 100 times. That was how much Tim could not let go of Superboy.
That does not seem like a wise choice.
Yeah. Well, it also kind of goes into uh later revelations for the character. But with Bruce, Tim was convinced Batman was still alive. Turns out he was right.
Of
Because
course he
Batman
was.
was just kind of lost in the timeline. And Tim and the Justice League were able to bring him back. That's a whole another discussion.
Okay.
And then the reboot happened.
Okay. Wow.
And
I'm not gonna lie.
let's not even go in.
I know the
Yeah, let's not even go to the
yes.
reboot stuff because that's another story all its own. The New 52, possibly one of the greatest missteps DC has done in many ways.
Okay. So wait. So tell me what happened with like Stephanie Brown then, because I have her marked as like so that Robin, also known as Spoiler, was created by Chuck Dixon and Tom Lyle and came out in Detective Comics number 647 in August 1992. So what was going on in 1992 that like ended up with this lady being dead at some point?
So Stephanie was originally not introduced to be a sidekick. She was the daughter of a C tier criminal known as a Clue Master, and her father Arthur Brown was kind of like the Riddler, except instead of leaving riddles, he left actual clues to what his crimes were.
That
And
seems
Stephanie
okay.
lived with him and her mother, and it was a very miserable existence because, similar to Jason, Stephanie's mother was a drug addict, and her father was a criminal. But Stephanie is a petty, petty woman, and that's why people love her because she will not be afraid to screw something up for somebody else if they're an awful person.
This
So
sounds like a
she
woman after my own heart.
Oh, 100%. So she took on the identity of the spoiler. And so she would go around and spoil her father's crimes. So she would make it to where nobody had to figure out what the clue was because she wrote it out for them with basically specifically how what's going on.
Wow.
And so she teamed up with Batman and Robin and Tim Drake Robin.
Yeah.
And they defeated her father. And initially she was only going to do this to get him arrested.
She's just like,
But
I don't
she
want my dad to be doing this anymore.
Yeah. But
Okay.
where Tim Drake became Robin because of altruism, Stephanie became a crime fighter because she just kind of enjoyed the thrill of the adventure. She also had a colossal crush on Robin.
This sounds like the reason that Rachel was fighting everybody in Animorphs because she wanted, like, she had a thing for Tobias and also she was a little bit crazy.
Mm,
Oh,
yeah. I mean, the way that she was kind of written at the time, not too far off, because Stephanie did not always get the best treatment by the writer.
okay.
Because like when she was crushing on Robin, Robin was dating another woman at the time, this Russian immigrant named Ariana, and Stephanie was kind of like, "Oh, I know you're dating somebody, but I don't care." And
Okay.
but the thing was, Tim still enjoyed going out and fighting crime with her, and you know, there was obvious sexual tension between them.
I'm
But then eventually Tim and Ariana did break up. A lot of drama there, a lot of stuff, but essentially, um, Stephanie and Tim got together. At which point, Stephanie found out that she was pregnant from a previous boyfriend.
okay. You can't really fight crime if you're like carrying a
Oh yeah, no,
fetus.
she was kind of out of action for a little while. She eventually had the baby, gave it up for adoption,
Okay.
which was never heard or seen from again. Uh, she went back to being spoiler, but eventually Tim had to change up his life some because an event happened called ground or God, what was the name of it? It was when the big quake hit Gotham. I cannot remember the name of the
Oh,
storyline.
the No Man's Land.
No Man's Land. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, the
I
quake
read the
and then
book.
No Man's Land. And Tim ended up having to like move to an old boys' school for a while, and then when he came back, he started at this other like public school. And Stephanie mistakenly thought that Tim was cheating on her with another girl. Around this time, Tim was forced to retire because his father had found out that he was Robin.
That'll happen.
Yeah, so during this time, there was no Robin working actively. So Stephanie, once again being the petty girl that she was being written as at the time, decided she was going to become Robin as an FU to Tim.
I mean, it's again, I like this. I can rock with this. I'm
Well,
just gonna go ahead and take your mantle.
yeah, that's the unfortunate thing though, because of the fact that they kind of implied that it was more out of pettiness rather than altruism. Stephanie's time as Robin was very short-lived
That's fair.
because Stephanie wasn't used to working with a partner, especially one who's as controlling as Batman. So after she disobeyed him a couple of times, she was fired. And again, that petty streak kicked in. She stole some of Batman's contingency plans for the crime lords of Gotham,
Oh,
which unfortunately jump-started a gang war that resulted in death of hundreds of thousands, and also resulted in her own death because she was tortured by the villain Black Mask, Gotham crime lord.
wait. That guy was in Emancipation of Harley Quinn, right? The
Correct.
Ewan McGregor character. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
And she was dead, but she
Right.
wasn't. Turns
How is
out,
it? Okay.
yeah, turns out her doctor, Leslie Tompkins, a Batman ally, faked her death and moved her to Africa so that way she would be able to recover. And yeah, there's a lot of drama going on with Leslie in that story too. But eventually, Stephanie did come back as
Okay.
spoiler, reconnected with Robin. Bruce died. Tim kind of went on his I'm going to find Batman thing. And Stephanie, who had become friends with the Robin at the time, Cassandra Cain, took over the mantle of Batgirl under the
Okay.
supervision of Barbara Gordon.
Okay, because we had like now that we were talking about like Cassandra Cain and like Barbara Gordon, like we have to cycle back to Damon Wayne in a short bit. But so Barbara is Barbara Joan Gordon. She was created by Gardner Fox and Carmine Infantio. She
We
first came out.
apologize for the French pronunciation.
I'm so sorry, Carmine. Um, I don't know if he's still around though because she was first introduced in Detective Comics 359, December 31st, 1966. And Cassandra Cain, whose government name is Cassandra Wusan Cain, came out in Batman 567 in July 1999, created by Kelly Puckett and Damian Scott. Cassandra
Technically,
Cain,
that's not her government name.
wait, what is her government name?
She definitely doesn't have one.
I mean, she also didn't have like the ability to speak for like a good chunk of time, right?
Yeah, but she wasn't given really a name when she was as part of that.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Her story is very complex. I
yeah.
don't know if we can get into that in this podcast. I feel like the Batgirls are
So
going to need their own.
so our Cassandra Cain and Barbara Gordon, they're not Robins
No.
because their dads are alive?
No, because they don't really toe the line of the Batman.
I see. Um,
So, I mean, let's start with Barbara. Barbara was not officially sanctioned by Batman.
okay.
She dressed up like Batgirl for a costume party and ended up saving a Bruce Wayne who was being captured by the Killer Moth.
Killer what?
Remember Killer Moth? A very sea level villain, similar to Clue Master.
1966 has some very interesting villains going on.
Oh yeah, 1950s and 1960s, comic book code authority and all that stuff made it to where the antagonists were a lot more interesting.
Okay.
But Barbara saved Bruce and ended up being pulled into this thing with the Killer Moth character, and she just decided that she liked helping people. She enjoyed the adventure of being Batgirl and started working as her own hero. She would team up with Batman and Robin, but she technically was her own agent. The Batgirl identity was a joke. She just did it as a joke for her father at the costume party.
Oh, wait. So did her dad know that she was Batgirl the whole time?
It's hard to say, depends on like the stories. A lot of imply that Jim did know that Barbara was Batgirl, but never stopped her. But then there's other times where they kind of imply he didn't know. So it kind of depends on who the writer is, but most people have the opinion that Jim knew and just respected Barbara's decision to do this role.
So, well, I mean, her decision to do this role only lasted so long until Jim had that one real bad day, I guess.
He,
So,
and and the thing was with Barbara, like I said, she worked with Batman and Robin, but she was never really considered a official member of like a terrific trio, if you will.
right.
She preferred to work on her own, and if her cases lined up with Batman and Robin, then great. And
Okay.
Batman and Robin respected that about her. They respected the fact that she was still kind of being her own hero.
And we're like talking about this lady and pretending that the Alicia Silverstone version of her, where she was Alfred's niece, doesn't exist, right?
I mean, there are people who still love that version of Batgirl, and I'm not going to fault anybody who enjoys that, but it was not Barbara Gordon, unfortunately.
Hmm.
And,
Okay.
but Barbara eventually gave up the Batgirl identity. It's funny, a lot of people assume that Barbara stopped being Batgirl because of the events of the Killing Joke. But technically, she had retired a few months beforehand. She had decided to, hang up the mantle and just kind of be a normal person. But then the Killing Joke happened where she was shot and crippled by the Joker. All for the sake of Joker and Batman's story.
Well, I mean, it's not like Women in Refrigerators hasn't started out in the DC verse, so that's fun.
Yeah. Shout out
Um,
to Gail Simone for coining that name.
it's really, really wild how much they do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Barbara and Cassandra Cain are not Robins, and it's not just because their dads are alive. And Damian Wayne, I guess, is a Robin because his dad is alive.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's like with Cassandra, she was never Robin, but she was a Batgirl, but she worked closer with Batman than Barbara did in many ways.
okay,
But she was more, still kind of working as her own independent hero. So Batman kind of just let her do what she needed to so long as she was doing the mission. And she was so skilled as a fighter, being like the best fighter in the DC universe,
mhm.
that Bruce kind of felt like he didn't need to have as much hands-on control of her like he did the Robins. Damian, meanwhile, was equally as dangerous and skilled as Cassandra was.
So let
Maybe
me make sure that we introduce him properly. So this
okay,
Robin is Damian Wayne. And so Damian Wayne is his kid with Talia al Ghul, I think.
correct.
So how'd
But
that work out?
the thing is, his introduction was kind of a retcon because the story that he was technically introduced in was not considered canon originally. It was an
Oh, really?
Elseworld story, roughly.
Oh,
Uh, so the events of that were not 100%, you know, in canon with what was happening, particularly because the floating timeline made it kind of confusing with how old Damien was versus how long Bruce has been active as a hero. But eventually Grant Morrison came on and wrote a story where he brought Damien into the story. And with this, Damien was born to Talia and Bruce. Bruce had no idea that the baby even existed.
right.
There's heavy implications that it was not a consenting,
Consensual?
yeah,
Yeah.
where drugs may have been forced upon Bruce. Some writers choose to ignore that. Other ones still embrace that. I personally would prefer it be consensual, but and because of
Yeah,
the
well,
timeline and because
you
of the
would prefer
timeline
to
thing,
yeah.
yeah, they imply that Damian was artificially aged up. So that explains why he's 10 years old when he shouldn't probably have been younger.
Okay. Also, this is a mouthy 10-year-old.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing is, Damian was trained by the League of Assassins. He was also treated like a prince. Everybody bowed to him. Everybody, treated him with the utmost royal respect because they knew that if they didn't, his mother or his grandfather, Rachel Ghoul, or he himself would kill them.
Oh, okay. So he's just wishing people out to the cornfield without even having to like get to the
Uh,
cornfield.
100%. Damien was a monster when he was first introduced. He was violent, aggressive, egotistical, and like his mother finally took him to Bruce as a way to hopefully direct Damien's rage and violence. And
Onto
also
the
kind of to,
unsuspecting citizens of Gotham?
yep. And also just kind of because Talia was feeling a bit like, all right, now he's your problem.
All right, she got him through
So,
party training. That's fair.
and the thing is, Damien showed up and immediately thought, well, all of this is going to be mine. I'm going to inherit everything about this. And so he had complete and utter disdain for anybody who stood in his way, including his adopted brethren. Dick and Tim in particular, because Jason was still not fully back from the dead at the time.
Okay.
And Damian was. Well, he almost killed Tim in their first interaction with each other.
Why?
And then he,
Okay.
and then he proceeded to
How?
go into Gotham. Huh?
How?
Tim tried to make friends with him, and Damian was dismissive and aggressive and violent, implied that he had hurt Alfred. And then Tim and Damian were fighting because, of
Of
course.
course.
At one point, Damian is hanging off the jaws of the giant mechanical T-Rex that's in the Batcave, and Tim proceeds to save him, to which Damian responds by backhanding him off the T-Rex and causing him to fall crashing down into Jason's memorial Robin case.
Can I fight a 10-year-old?
Probably not this one.
What if I sneak up on him and slap him across the Anyway, that's you know what? No, I don't need to
Yeah.
meet him with violence. I just don't need to hang out with him. Got it. All right.
Yeah.
So, has he calmed down at all in the last
He
few
has.
years?
Damian eventually started to follow Bruce's teachings and start to understand where he was coming from and start to learn empathy. The problem that writers have with Damian is they always want to write him as a jerk, but unfortunately that interferes with his character development. So he'll have like stories where he progresses to being a better person and then suddenly it's back to being a little asshole again.
I mean, children are like, their character development is all over the place, but like they don't normally go from just like, I am an asshole, I am going to get better, and then I'm straight back to asshole again.
Yeah,
They
and that's
gotta
the
work
thing
on that.
with Damien, he's very mature for his age. He doesn't act like a child, he acts like an adult.
That's also a
So,
problem.
yeah. But the thing is, eventually Damien made friends, especially with Superman's son, Jonathan Kent. And that's helped Damien calm down a lot. He's become a lot more of a better brother. He's connected with the other Robins, especially Dick Grayson. Because during the time Bruce was dead, Dick took over as Batman.
Mhm.
And Damien, in a move that still people find controversial, Dick fired Tim as Robin and made Damien his Robin because he felt Damien needed the structure better than Bruce or than Tim did.
That's fair, but also
Tim
that's
was going through it at the time.
Tim is
This is
always going through it.
Yeah,
Like
this is what caused
Tim's
Tim to
Tim's
take
new
on.
name is like Mr. Going Through It. That's it.
Yeah, and this is what caused Tim to become Red Robin because he was not ready to give up a Robin identity. So he took on this new identity, which was kind of like a nice middle point between being Robin and Batman.
Right.
Damian, meanwhile, under Dick's tutelage softened a lot because he had this so friendly, kind, optimistic mentor.
Oh,
And
wow.
anybody who
So the
knows
happy
Dick
Robin
Grayson,
finally comes around full circle.
and that's the thing, because of the fact that Batman was the optimistic and kind one, Damian softened because he had that juxtapose, just like Bruce would soften when Dick, Jason, Tim, and even Stephanie were part of his life. And
Wow. That's beautiful. Um, I'm not gonna lie, I do have big plans to figure out now how I'm gonna be able to drop all of this into conversation this weekend.
yeah,
I did just start seeing a hair lady around the corner from me who does really good work. And so hopefully I don't annoy her too much whenever I start telling her about this while she's shampooing. So, all right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and then we will be back to get you hyped up for next week. Welcome back to Up Your Nerd Cred. So this week ahead is actually going to be a super busy one in the DC and or Marvel universes. Wait, how do you know? Well, in 1976, DC Comics put out a whole calendar with canon dates for all kinds of birthdays and events. Marvel does not like putting canon dates out there in the graphic novel verses that much. They put a few into the MCU, and so we don't have like a lot of that information. But what we do know is that DC has told us that this is the anniversary of the week coming up that both Jim Gordon graduated law school and the week that the Waynes got to see Zorro with their son Bruce, and absolutely nothing else happened to them, right?
yeah, sure, nothing happened. How are the Waynes doing, by the way?
It's fine. We don't need to sit there and figure out like how Jim's Gordon's law school graduation and like his best buddies anyway, that's not important. We don't need to worry about that. Listeners, we have in fact come to the end of our podcast. I know you are absolutely devastated about this. How is it over so soon? Well, good news. Our next episode is going to be coming out in a week. That's right. You are going to be able to listen to us again on June 13th. So you're also more than welcome to listen to this episode again if that's not fast enough. Um,
Nerd cred takes time to build.
and hopefully you're ready to talk about this at the next party.
People don't usually talk about this at parties.
This is clearly a sign that we need to figure out how to get people talking about fun things at parties.
You literally just stopped talking about Cowboy Carter 4 seconds ago.
Okay, well, now that you mention it.
And now it's time to mention that we have an Instagram at Up Your Nerd Cred Pod. We're on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and working on expanding our reach. If you have a burning question that you want us to discuss, so you can up your nerd cred, make sure you like and subscribe, leave comments, and if we pick your question, we'll shout you out in the discussion segment.
Also, please make sure you get your friends to also like and subscribe to the pod, and family and coworkers you trust to not be weird about listening to the same podcast, and
Good night, everybody.